Hey everyone, welcome back to Digital Worship. I'm Pastor John Corollis, and it's great to have you with us as we continue in our series, Our Common Humanity. We've been talking about what it means that God has created all things, and He's created all of us, and that ties us together as people on earth, as recipients of His love and provision. Last week we talked about baptism and the glorious fact, the gracious fact that God has stepped toward us and washed us clean and wrapped us up in Christ's righteousness, really freeing us from the fears and anxieties of trying to live a life worthy of His love. And now we've been given this opportunity to pursue the life that He has called us to and baptized us for, washed us clean for, because we know that we are not at risk of somehow losing His favor. He's given us all of it through the waters of baptism and His Word. Today, though, we're going to talk about something that should characterize our life as Christians, something that God has given us as really a gift and a tool by which we can live our life in a way that not only deepens our connection to God, but surprisingly, and maybe not so surprisingly, deepens our relationship with the other people in life around us. And what's amazing about this idea that we're talking about is that it doesn't only apply to churchy situations and life in the Christian community. If we take this concept and apply it into all of our human relationships, I truly believe that each of them will grow and flourish or will end, but it might be a reasonable ending, and I'll get into why that is. What we're talking about today is confession. And when I say confession, there's a number of things that I could mean simply by that word. A confession could be something as simple as admitting to doing something wrong. A confession could also be a name for a particular kind of document that outlines your beliefs about something. Or a confession can be simply saying something out loud that you truly believe or making a commitment to someone or something. Today we're going to be talking about kind of that first idea of confession, admitting to something we've done wrong, but as it applies specifically into the relationships that we have, namely, and most importantly, the relationship we have with God. You see, God has cleared the way for us to know Him and to enjoy a relationship with Him and to be recipients of His love and recipients of His grace. But the truth is, we struggle to live a life worthy of that calling. We don't always live up to the instructions God gives us. We certainly fail at the Ten Commandments, just as an example of what the life of a Christian should look like. And we often even break down in our obedience of the things in this life that we're called to follow, whether it be as small as a speed limit or as significant as maybe an HR violation or something like that. You see, we struggle to live a good and perfect life. And confession is the gift that God gives us to navigate the reality of that ongoing struggle. Confession is that willingness to say to God, I've done something wrong. Please forgive me. Lord, I have messed up in this particular area or broken this particular promise that I've made. Can you forgive me? Will you forgive me? And we know that according to God's grace and commitment of love toward us, He speaks a word that is loving, that is understanding. He says, I know you. I know this has happened, and I love you. Look at the death of my Son on the cross, not only as proof of how far I'm willing to go for you, but also the transaction of His perfect life cut short and put to death as a sacrifice that clears the way, that pays the cost of all of the imperfect things that we might do, of all the mistakes we might make. That's the gift of confession in our relationship with God. He clears the path for us to continue to have a deep and meaningful connection with Him. Despite all of our daily mistakes, our daily sins, our transgressions, our complaints, our attitude issues, God says, confess those things to me. Be open with me about those things and let me speak a restorative word, a word of new life, a word of forgiveness for you. It's actually connected to the idea of baptism in a powerful way, because how do we live out our baptisms each day? We live out our baptisms by putting to death the old way, the old man, the old Adam. Really, those are all kind of ways for us to refer to our sinful nature more poetically. How do we put to death our sinful nature? We admit of it and allow God's word of forgiveness to speak powerfully over us, that He might lead us into greater obedience, lead us into better living, so that not that we might continue to rank up in our relationship with Him or our Christian title or get a bigger mansion in heaven. Instead, it is out of response for the great love that he has already shown us. He's already gone all the way for us. And this practice of confession is actually a way for us to be ever mindful of the great love that he has for us. But that's not the only place in life that confession has a role for us, a role to play. It connects to our relationship with others, our common humanity. What are the connections that we have? What are the unities that we have with the people around us, even though the world would try to say that we are divided 100 different ways? Right? God has given us this gift of confession as a way for us to bind ourselves closer together through confessing the things that we've done wrong to each other, on account of each other, and also speaking words of forgiveness and absolution, of a restoration and new life to one another as well. And this isn't strictly a spiritual thing. I think it ties to our souls and it's a spiritual reality. But even if someone looks at the world completely different from us, doesn't even have a concept of God, in order for us to have a healthy relationship with that person, we need to be honest about the times when we fall short, and we need to be gracious about the times that they do. That's how friendships are born. That's how great relationships with employees and employees are sustained. That's how good marriages stay healthy. It's through that ongoing conversation of confessing my shortfalls and being gracious for the shortfalls of others. How can I speak a word of grace to someone? The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the church in Ephesus, this is a major city in Asia at the time of the early Christians. This was like, New York City or Los Angeles or even, the Phoenix metro. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of people. There's great opportunities. And the church is there trying to understand who they are and what their place is, and really how are they supposed to relate to each other and to the people outside of the church who are still all around them. Paul is giving them some simple and clear instructions for what living the new life should look like. And again, what I want to stress here is Paul is not saying, here are the rules for living the Christian life, do them or you're out. He is giving them a roadmap for growing in faith. What does it mean to be a better Christian? Not because I'm trying to win God's favor. Again, I don't know if I can stress that enough. But because of the great love that he's already shown me, because of the reality that he's already spoken over me in the truth of his love and by the power of his Spirit. What does Paul say to this young church that's trying to understand how to live the Christian life? He says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. God has forgiven you on account of Christ, through Christ. Because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, you are forgiven by God's love. And he has communicated that to you through the power of the Spirit. And then he says, don't let it stop with me, but treat each other in a similar way. Have an attitude of tender-hearted love and kindness toward your brothers and sisters, and forgive them. This is the amazing thing that I find throughout all of the epistles, the letters to the early church in the New Testament. Paul knows, and the other writers know, because God knows, we are going to fail each other. We are going to let each other down. There are going to be conflicts and fights and arguments, and there are times where we simply mess it up. But what does he say? He doesn't say, don't do that, because he knows that it's going to happen. He says, when that happens, forgive each other. Be gracious. Listen to each other. Speak openly to each other about those shortfalls. Be gracious with one another. Be kind. Be tender-hearted. How often do we hear that instruction in today's day and age? We're told to stand strong and to be resolute and to be on the offensive for our beliefs. And there are certainly things and places and contexts where it makes sense to have that attitude. But when it comes to the relationship we have with other people, with our brothers and sisters, we are called to be tender-hearted, gentle, humble, and we are called to be forgiving. Here's the amazing thing about that. When we are forgiving toward other people, they become more forgiving themselves. And then we have created a small pocket of forgiveness, a small pocket of restoration and renewal right here within our own little corner of the world. And the beautiful thing about that is no restorative, forgiving corner of the world just cycles down into a drain and disappears. It actually expands, because that is the way that God chose to be at work through the world, the work of forgiveness. The method of giving grace when there is actually more maybe reason for punishment or cutting somebody out. Forgiveness is the way that God has said, I will expand my way in the world. I will expand my mission in the world. I will change the hearts of people. How does he do it? Through forgiveness. When we talk about confession, we can't help but keep the other word of forgiveness with it as well. The first part of confession is admitting what we've done wrong. But the second part of confession that can't be separated is receiving the forgiveness of not only God who has forgiven us through Jesus, but the forgiveness of our brothers and sisters who are just as imperfect as we are. And so in an ironic way, right, our imperfection, in an ironic way, our imperfection unites us because we all have that. But our forgiveness is actually a proactive way for us to lean into that connection that we have with other people. Now, I mentioned something about relationships deepening, even if someone is coming from a totally different spiritual perspective than us. And that is because when we speak forgiveness just on our own part into the life of somebody else, they now have received grace, and they may also be participative in giving of grace themselves. Now, there are times where we need to just admit of the things we've done wrong, and someone isn't ready to offer grace. And someone isn't in a place where forgiveness is a mindset that they have. And so they may simply say, you know what, you're right, and frankly, I don't really want to carry this any further. And I'm not trying to say that I have the secret for keeping every relationship we ever have in life going for the rest of our days here on earth. But what I am saying is this is actually a helpful tool for us to establish meaningful and helpful relationships, ones that are healthy and produce things in our life for us and for the other people. And when that doesn't take place, sometimes it's good for a relationship to end, as hard and sad as that is. See, we are called to be confessing people. We confess the faith we have in Jesus through the words of our beliefs, like the Apostles' Creed. God made us, God redeemed us, God calls us. We also confess of the things we've done wrong. We speak words of gracious love to the times when someone admits to something they've done wrong to us. And in that cycle of confession and forgiveness, the love of God is spread to all the corners of the world. I pray that God would bless and keep you this week, that He would encourage and strengthen your faith, and that as we finish up this series next week in this idea of being sustained in the faith through the gift of Jesus' own body and blood for our life in Him, you would have the courage to confess of the things that you've done wrong, but also have the heart of faith to receive the renewing word of forgiveness on behalf of Christ's life and death. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Remember those walls that we call sin and shame? They were like prisons that we couldn't escape. But He came and He died and He rose. Those walls are rubble now. Remember those giants we call death and grave? They were like prisons that we couldn't escape. But He came and He died and He rose. Those giants are dead now. This is our God, this is who He is. He loves us. This is our God, this is what He does. He saves us. He bore the cross, beat the grave. Let heaven and earth proclaim, this is our God, King Jesus. Remember that fear that took our breath away. This so we